16th of March, second Sunday in Lent. Sermon on Genesis chapter 15, verses 1 to 12 and 17 to 18. Psalm 27, verses 1 to 7 and 13 to 14. Philippians chapter 3, verses 17 to chapter 4, verse 1. And Luke chapter 13, verses 31 to 35. As Christians, we need to hold on to our faith through troubled times and disappointments. It has always been so. Worshippers of the one true God have had their faith tested. They've had to be patient, sometimes endure suffering, believe against all the odds. Being a follower of the Lord is not a ticket for an easy ride, but our destination is certain. We see that demonstrated in the story of Abraham. He and his wife Sarah were promised a land and an heir. In fact, God told Abraham that his progeny would be as numerous as the stars in the heavens. However, the years passed. Abraham and his wife grew old, and they still had no son. He questioned God, "How am I able to know?" And God performed a ceremony to ratify his promises. It's a strange procedure to us. Abraham was to take a heifer, a goat, a ram, a turtle dove and a pigeon, cut their bodies in half and lay them in two opposing lines. As darkness fell, a smoking brazier and a flaming torch, representing God, passed between the divided bodies of the animals, and God reiterated his promises that Abraham would indeed have offspring who would possess the land shown to him. This was a self-maledictory covenant in which the participants each vowed that if he broke the covenant, his body would be broken, as were the bodies of the animals. God kept his promises, but poignantly there is no hint here of the eventual outworking of this vow, that Abraham's descendants would fail to keep the covenant, and that when they did, it would be God himself in Jesus Christ who would give his body to be broken. God is utterly to be trusted. Psalm 27 is a triumph song of confidence in the Lord. David sang, "The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid?" We can make his words our own. We know that David faced many dangers, both before he became king of Israel and later in his reign. He made serious mistakes, but he never lost his faith in the Lord, nor his love for him. The final words of this psalm are, I believe, especially for us. Wait for the Lord, be strong, and let your heart take courage. Wait for the Lord. Abraham had to wait for God's promises to be fulfilled, as indeed they were. We also are in a time of waiting between the first coming of Jesus and his second coming, when all the promises will be fulfilled of peace, an end to suffering, sin and death, and a wonderful future opening out for us. In his Gospel, Luke relates the anguish that Jesus experienced during his ministry. Jesus was aware of the opposition of many of the political and religious leaders. He was warned that Herod wanted to kill him, but his message to Herod was, "Listen, I am casting out demons and performing cures today and tomorrow. Yet I must be on my way, because it is impossible for a prophet to be killed outside Jerusalem." Jesus knew that his destiny lay in that city, where he would be crucified, to purchase our salvation and to reconcile us to God. He knew also that his death was God's will. It would be brought about because he would be rejected by many of his own people. Jesus lamented, "Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to it. See, your house is abandoned to you." We can feel Jesus' pain and longing when he says, How often have I desired to gather your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings, and you were not willing. Jesus knew the ultimate outcome of his redeeming work, but it nevertheless caused him disappointment, anguish and grief to be rejected by his own people. The Apostle Paul clearly knew the same frustration during his ministry. In his letter to the Philippians, he encouraged his readers to keep their faith and patience, even though they were in the midst of many who live as enemies of the cross of Christ. Paul shed tears as he wrote of those who had their minds on earthly things, focusing on greed and acquisition rather than the kingdom. But he reminded the believers that they were already citizens of heaven and were awaiting the return of their Saviour, who would transform their lives by his power. His message to them was to stand firm. These words are for us too. We seem to be in unprecedented times. There have always been wars, awful crimes and natural disasters such as earthquakes. But things seem to be escalating out of all control now, particularly with climate change, which is overtaking us far more rapidly than even scientists had envisaged. We appear to be reaching a tipping point beyond which it would be impossible to retrieve the situation. And even so, the world's political leaders seem unconcerned. Some even deny there is a problem. They're putting economic growth and as exploitation of the earth's resources ahead of common sense. And since I wrote this sermon, I've heard on the news just now that Keir Starmer is investing huge amounts of money in weaponry and defence at the expense of foreign aid. There's an increase in extreme right-wing policies, some supported by evangelicals claiming to be Christians. Furthermore, ultra-rich individuals are not only squandering their wealth in selfish pursuits to the cost of many of the world's poorest, but are dabbling in governments and seeking to manipulate decisions made. It would be easy to wonder what God is doing about all this, even to consider that he's powerless or uncaring. However, our Bible passages today give us a message of hope to keep our faith and to endure. Christ's return is a long time in coming, far longer than anticipated by Paul's generation, who appear to have expected it during their own lifetime. However, we have many examples in the scriptures of God's people having to be patient. Abraham asked God for proof that he would keep his promises. David kept his faith even though he had to ask God to conceal him from the danger that threatened. Paul shed tears over the situation, but encouraged the believers to stand firm. And Jesus grieved over the unfaithfulness in the city of Jerusalem. I believe our only hope is in the coming kingdom. Many probably think I'm a religious nut for preaching so regularly on the return of Jesus. But it seems that more and more it is that message that springs out from the Bible passages that I tackle each week for these sermons. It's a wonderful hope, one which lifts us out of fear and despair, so that we can faithfully declare with David, "The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be in dread?"